Hello, this is Jason Payne for Coldwell Banker Dan Harper Realty. Texas has a very unique housing market. We have tons of people flooding in from California, New York, and Illinois, and major corporations are moving here too. So today I'm at the 2020 housing forecast. We're going to be listening to Dr. Rick Gaines. He's the Chief Economics Director at the Real Estate Institute at Texas A&M. Always has tons of great information. Let's see what he has to say.
Providing consulting services to numerous businesses, institutions, developers, and all levels of government organizations. He served as president of Rice University, an urban research center affiliated with Rice University, and was associate professor of real estate and finance at the University of South Carolina. Please welcome Dr. Jim Gaines.
I do appreciate very much being asked to come and share with you. And I also, especially Kim, thank you very much for putting me on in front of Bain instead of behind me. You haven't heard John yet. You'll understand in a few minutes why I say that. I do appreciate being here. It's always fun. San Antonio is doing great. I mean, you don't really need me to tell you that. You know what economics is. I'm your token economist right now. Economics is just the science of taking common sense and making it unintelligible. And so that's my job here this morning, is to tell you about the economy and what's going on. And quite frankly, you can tell me more about what's going on locally, but we'll see how it's going. If you're not familiar with the center, shame on you as realtors and members of the San Antonio Board of Realtors. We're 48 years old. And we're kind of very proud of it. We're a unique center. We are funded by donations, or we get a proportion of your renewal fee every year when you renew, and that's what's funded the center over the years. Our job is to give you information, analysis, data. We're getting better at it. We're actually even going to do some forecasting, which is dangerous. And that's the reason they ask an old guy like me to do it, because they figure I'm already past the age of caring. But everything we do, we put on the website. It's up there. And I'm killing time so you can see the website address. Okay, if you hadn't figured that out. Let me get to the economy. All right, we're doing great. The country's doing pretty good. Texas is doing absolutely great. And yeah. And I'm going to show you, we're going to talk about it. If you're not aware of it, and you should be, but we're in the 127th month of continuous economic expansion since the end of the Great Recession of 07-08. The National Bureau of Economic Research, which is an ad hoc group of a whole bunch of economists, which is scary, but they determine the dates of when recessions and expansion start and stop. They do the official nomenclature. And they declared that the Great Recession ended in June of 2009. Now I got to tell you, it was October of 2010 when they made that announcement. About 15, 16 months later. Now I tell you that so you understand that economists are not only lousy forecasters, hell, we can't even predict the past. So bear with me when I give you a forecast. But we're in the 127th month, continuous expansion, and I'm going to tell you, at least for the time being, the general consensus among economists, which is always dangerous, because as soon as you get them all to agree, something's wrong. But the general consensus is that's going to continue for at least a while. Okay? So I've given you the answer. That's the good news. Now, it's really all pretty good news. The growth at the U.S. level, the national economy, I'm an economist, so you're going to be graphs and charts and all that kind of stuff here in a minute. It's been kind of slow and steady. It has not been the kind of bounce back recovery that we had after almost all the other recessions. recessions after World War II. So we're looking at what's going on. Let me give you a quick rundown. I don't need to go through all this. Most of it you kind of already know. You may not know the statistics, but you know the feel for it. GDP growth is going, and incidentally, third quarter just came out this week, this past 4 or 5 days. U.S. is going at about 2.0, 2.1%. Texas, 4% for the quarter. Number one state in the country. So we're still churning at about twice the rate of the U.S. Our employment growth is about twice the rate of the U.S. And you can see spending. The thing that's really supporting our economy right now is spending. And Daniel was talking about that earlier, about we need tax revenue from sales tax revenue and so on. I want to tell you, it is your patriotic duty to go and spend 110% of what you make. And I want you to know that my wife is the most patriotic American in this country. But the PCE that you see there is personal consumption expenditures. That's the euphemism that the economists use for spending, general spending. It's up. We're spending a lot of money. And that's what a free market capitalistic system is based on, is that everybody's spending money. It's transacted. People spending stuff. Not only us, but companies spending money, government spending money, get things churning around and everybody having a good time and so forth. That's been our main support in the past year, actually for the past couple of years. Jobs have been added. The rate of increase in jobs slowed down a little bit, 145,000 last month, which is down from the average that we've had the last several years, closer to 180. But that's okay. It's still a pretty good growth rate that's going on. Unemployment, you're all aware, you keep reading about it all the time. Historical, I mean, we haven't been this low an unemployment rate for, 40 years, almost 50 years, so we're seeing that. All these things are good. The thing that really hadn't caught up with us yet is earnings. People aren't making as much money. We got to make more money, right? Everybody wants to make more money. Well, and across the board, that's true. The income levels haven't kept up while everybody's employed, and that's key. You got to have. You're in the real estate business, right? What's important? Number of people, jobs, and income. After that, it don't matter. Okay? Now, a few years ago, back in 2003, 4, 5, you didn't even need the jobs and income as long as you had people. Because anybody who could fall in the mirror got 110%. Right? Well, that's changed. Now the first question is, do you have a job? The second question is, how much do you make? But anyway, we're seeing these things go along. And here it is. I mean, economics, you want to know what's going to go on? What's going to happen? I'm going to go through these with you, but you know it as well as I do. Jobs and income, okay? Demographics, that's people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about population growth, the kind of population we have, how we don't like each other anymore, and that's one thing. Capital and money markets, now that's a key one right there, because obviously, and particularly for real estate, that's important. Interest, I'm going to talk about interest rates. Anybody who does is either a fool or a liar. When I get finished, you take your choice. So we'll say, but the capital and money markets, that's if there's a cloud on the horizon, on the economic prosperity horizon, if you will. That's it. It's capital markets. It's debt. We got a lot of debt going. That was what got us in trouble with the Great Recession. Okay, and the one there that really killed was the housing and household debt that triggered the downturn, and of course how it was all treated in the capital and financial markets. We're seeing that come back around now, but it's more on the corporate and sovereign side. By sovereign, I mean countries. U.S. this year, in 2019, had to borrow, the United States government had to borrow just shy of $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It will exceed $1 trillion in 2020 to cover the deficit. They're spending $1 trillion more than what they got in revenue. If they just give me a part of it, I could retire. You know, it's amazing how this is going. But this is going on around the world, And now we're seeing some of the strains start to hit the capital market on the debt structure, the availability of funds, the cost of funds, and so forth. And then last but not least, of course, is the government. And government here, in terms of influencing real estate, as you well know, that's everything. It's from federal government, state government, local government, heck down to the HOAs, right? I mean, they act like a government unit. I know they're not technically a government unit, but they have rules, regulations, enforcement, whether or not, what color the fence has to be painted, whatever. So we're seeing these kinds of things influence the market more and more. And here's what we got to do. We just got to look at what, where, why, when. Any of these can go together or in combination. And then what clouds are on the horizon with any of them. And I've just told you what I thought the biggest one. Here's where it is at the national level. I'm just simplifying it. Job growth. The blue lines, the blue bars, that's the job growth. The red line in through there is the unemployment rate, so you can kind of see. The unemployment rate goes down when jobs are plentiful, and it comes up when jobs aren't. Well, gee, duh. You got to have real smarts to figure that one out. The little arrows going down, those are recessions. And it's a chicken or the egg a little bit, but it's coincident that when you have a recession, jobs get lost, right? So you see the wave in there in the curve, and you see that's when we had the recession. Back in the early 90s, and then the 2000, 2001, that was the tech bust, the dot-com bust, if you will, and then the Great Recession. And what I'm pointing out to you is so far, we haven't seen that top of the curve. It's a technical economic term. It's called a hump over. That's when a curve is going up and then it turns this way. I call that a hump over. Okay? And you watch out for hump overs. And when you see a hump over, aha! There's something going on there, and there's a change coming, or it's already taken place. In many cases, it's already taken place, and not much you can do about it. But we're seeing that. Profits. Free market capitalist system, the word profit somehow has lately become, it's not a four-letter word, but it's becoming treated like that. And what seems to be getting lost in the shuffle is business has to make a profit, or it goes out of business. Right?
Amen.
Yeah. You got to make it. I mean, it just makes sense. All right. Corporate profits are up a little bit. Of course, we had the change in the tax law, 2018 tax law, that lowered the corporate tax rate, and that was supposed to be a big boost to corporate America to give them more after-tax earnings. And the theory was, the hope was, that they would take that extra money that they made profits with and do what? Put it back into your companies, invest, expand, hire more people, do more things. Yeah. Didn't happen. Or at least not to the extent that what they were looking for. What has happened is that a lot of what happened with the extra profits from corporate America have been used to buy back stock, reduce debt. They've been laying people off. And in fact, many corporations have actually gone out and borrowed money to pay dividends and buy back stock so they can reduce the number of shares outstanding to keep the earnings per share up. It's arithmetic. Lower the denominator, even if your numerator comes down, your earnings per share stay up. Because it's all a sort of a shell game of keeping the stock prices up. That's something we got to watch out for. And this is a little bit misleading slide because I can give you more detail here. This is total corporate profits, after-tax profits. The non-financial actually has a slight negative trend to it. So what we're looking for is what's going on, excluding the banks and financial institutions and the Goldman Sachs and all the financial institutions. So you have to kind of watch that. That's what I was talking about, that capital money market. Here's what I'm talking about. The non-financial companies are actually kind of losing money. It's got that downward trend. Right now, it's not significant. I can tell you, every recession we've had, though, that curve has gone down. There have been two things that we watch for recessions coming: profits and the housing market. I'm going to get to housing here in a minute, but the housing market, if you're not aware of it, you should be. at the national level, the housing market has not recovered from the Great Recession. We're what, 15, almost 10, 12 years out? And we haven't recovered. We haven't recovered. I'll show you graphically here in a little bit. Consumer Confidence Index, we watch that. The spending, I was saying a minute ago, is so important. Spending is primarily based on psychology. You feel good. You want to go buy things. You got money in your pocket. You got wealth, or you feel wealthy. You go buy things. So we watch this index particularly. There's 2 or 3 of them. This is Conference Board. But we watch the consumer confidence to see how people are feeling about spending their money. It's got a little bit downward trend here lately on it. People are getting a little nervous. We've had such high level of prosperity and so forth. The good news is, though, it's still at a pretty high level. It's still sticking up there at a pretty high level. Hadn't come back too much. Small business. These are just some of the indicators that we're watching. Small business is Main Street America. This is National Federation of Independent Businesses. They do a survey every month. They say, how do you think things are going? And if more than half of them say good, then it's good. And if more than half say bad, then it's bad. It's the diffusion index. That's how they measure it. And you can see, you see the big jump up right in the middle of that graph, right in the curve? You know? I don't know what the opposite of a hump over. I guess it's a hump up. You can see that the line jumps up. Well, that was, I can tell you exactly the date that happened. When it went up was November 10th, 2016. Like if you go and look at the date, November 10th, 2016. That rings a bell, right? Okay? That's the reason why this coming year is going to be kind of important. And everything I'm telling you may go out the window come November, depending on how it all unfolds. And then the last quarter of last year, fourth quarter 2018, if you remember, was a really down time. Price of oil came down. Interest rates went up to nearly 5% for buying a house. In fact, in some areas it actually exceeded that. And of course, if it was a riskier buyer, that was more than that. But you can see how the small businesses around the country, though, are generally optimistic. And here lately, they've ticked back up a little bit, although it just came out this morning. I was sitting over here checking my phone. It just came out this morning, and it kind of cooled by about a point or so, but it's basically hanging in the same area. I obviously didn't have time to update the slide in the last 30 seconds. But it's still doing pretty well. So Main Street is still looking at the economy and still looking at what's going on from a philosophical standpoint of being pretty good. We'll have to see how all of that goes. One of the things that happened, I talked about the financial capital markets, now I got to hit you with a technical thing. And we had a thing, it happened, it first happened, I think it was April or May of last year. The yield curve inverted. You can take this to the next cocktail party and you can really, wow. Oh yeah, we had an inverted yield curve. Look at it. You see the blue line on there? The yield curve is simply the plotting out of interest rates, short-term to long-term. So on the far left over there, it's the 1 month interest rate, and on the far right, it's the 30-year. And the different dots in between are just different periods of time. The blue line is what that curve is supposed to look like, and that was true back in June of 2018. And all it means is long-term rates are greater than short-term rates. I mean, if you're going to lend me money, or you're going to borrow money for a longer period of time, you expect to have to pay a higher rate or a lower rate. Well, there's two things that happen here. The risk, of course, goes up the longer the term. Number one, the longer the term, things can go wrong. You lose your job, whatever, okay? And you don't pay back the money. That's a risk to the lender. So he's got to get compensated, so he charges a higher rate. Second risk is that the dollars you're going to pay back in the future are not worth as much as the dollars that got lent today. That's the future value of money, okay? Inflation, if you will, call it that. And so that risk needs to be compensated. So longer term rates tend to be higher than short term rates. Well, what happens is, you see the red, the green, and the orange lines, it inverted because it turned out that the longer term rates were actually lower than the short-term rates. It was cheaper to borrow money for 10 years than it was for 2 months in terms of interest rate cost. That's an inverted yield curve. Why is that important? Well, first of all, the financial markets don't know what the hell to do with it because they get confused. And the black line is the current one through December, and you can see it's not sure what the opposite of inverted. I guess inverted. It came back to looking more normal. Not truly normal. It's not back up to looking like the blue line yet, but at least in general, the long-term rates are at least a little bit higher than the short-term rates. So here's the importance. We've never had a recession in this country that wasn't preceded by an inverted yield curve. 6 to 18 months, general lead time. And yes, during that period of time, it can convert back. It can convert, it can convert back to normal. But we haven't, and so if we had it, if it's 6 to 18 months, and it was inverted as late as October, we're probably looking at, if you just use that as your only measure, we're looking at somewhere at around the end of this year or the beginning of next year that we need to watch out. Okay? I'm not saying it's going to happen. That's not a forecast. I'm just saying that on that measure, that would be one of the things that you would watch for. Can we overcome it? The inverted yield curve, like I said, we've never had a recession without one. On the other hand, the inverted yield curve has successfully predicted 9 of the last 7. Stay with me. Stay with me. Yeah, so it is possible that you can have it and not have a recession because other things can overtake it and do better. So these are the things that are going on at the national level. Now, no economist really knows how to factor in, when I talk about the government, what's been going on overseas, over in the Mideast the last 2 weeks. I mean, if you're like me, I was watching the news on TV and so forth, and looking at the talking heads that come on. Does it get to you that after a while they all just look and sound alike? Okay? Yeah. It so happens that our chief econometrician at the Real Estate Center is an Iranian, and in fact was on the Shah's personal staff, economic staff, as an oil and gas economist. So I got to tell you, the next day I went in and said, Ali, are we at war? And it was because I said, they're asking all these guys on TV that look like me, and that's not who they ought to ask. They ought to ask somebody who looks like you. And we're good enough friends. That was not an insult. We're good friends. And he said, no, I didn't think so. So I thought it was interesting. And he said that the general Iranians don't want to mess with America. That's just a good thing to know, right? They really don't. And more and more, and you can hear it in the news. They just came out here the last couple of 3 days about the plane they shot down. That they're not happy with the folks they got either. The problem is they don't know how to get rid of it, what to do with it. Let me talk about interest rates for a little bit. What we've got going here is, here's the 3 rate. The green line across the bottom is the federal funds rate. It's the interbank overnight lending rate. This is the rate you read about in the newspaper every 6 weeks when the Federal Reserve's Federal Open Market Committee gets together and they decide to set a target for a short-term rate. This is the rate that they're talking about. And what you can see is, you can see how it stayed almost effectively down at 0 for such a long period of time. That was Greenspan into Bernanke, on into Yellen's initial term as head to the Fed, and then started the stepwise. It looks like stair-step increases on the rate. And then, as you know, last year there was 3 rate decreases. They had to bring them back down. And the interesting thing that happened was while they were doing the staircase increases, what you can see is the 10-year Treasury rate, which is the bright blue line, and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, which is the Freddie Mac 30-year fixed mortgage rate, they were coming down. The longer-term rates were coming down while they were raising the short-term rates. That ain't supposed to happen, okay? And quite frankly, the Fed probably overshot the mark, hence the declines, reductions that they've had, the last 3 reductions. If you can see, where we are, we're still in lower than 4%, right? Can you get loans now less than 4%? Yeah. You can probably get them down in the low 3s. You get 15 years in the high FICA and a little down payment and maneuver. But even the millennials that you're now having to deal with, right? I'm going to talk about them in a minute. Even some of them can get pretty good financing, and for those of us, with this color hair, you ask us what interest rates should be for buying a house, and 8, 9, 10%. We're used to that. They'll do that all day. But today's group, the group coming through, you get much more than about 5 or 5.5, and you're going to lose it real quick. They're going to have problems with it. So we're going to have to see how that all works out. But why would long-term rates keep coming down when the short-term rate, the Fed was doing it? Well, here's my spaghetti graph. We didn't have spaghetti for breakfast, but nevertheless, it's inflation. Inflation has been holding pat forth. The inflation numbers just also came out this morning or yesterday, and while it was up a little bit, the CPI was up by 2.2%. Core inflation, that's when you take out food and energy, because none of us eat or drive a car. But those are the highly variable. They go like a yo-yo, up and down. So you take those out to see if you can get some steadiness. That core PCE is still hanging right around that 2%, 1.8, 2%, maybe 2.05, that kind of thing. It's just right there. And the general theory in economics is you've got to have some inflation. If you don't have people spending money, if you don't have business transactions going on, if you don't have economic activity, if you do have those things, price levels are in general going to kind of bounce up a little bit because people are going to start making more money and they're going to bid prices up. And you expect to have that. The irony is during all that period of time when that green line was down near 0 and then when they were stepping it up, what the Fed was actually trying to do was create inflation. They were trying to inflate the economy. They actually even said that in their statements. They were trying to inflate the economy. And it was ironic because they couldn't do it. Didn't work. They pumped it. We had the HAMP, the heart, the hippity, the hoppity, the hoop hop, the QE 1, 2, 3, infinitum, all those. The government pumped something like $3 to $3.5 trillion into the economy and didn't create any inflation. Now that was whoa, wait a minute. What the heck's going on here? Couldn't do it. It didn't happen. And so it's going to be interesting. Now, right now, the general feel is that the Fed isn't going to do anything. They're going to sit on their hands, which quite frankly is the best thing they can do. Unfortunately, being in the public eye, sitting on your hands, isn't perceived as a good thing. Right? When something happens, you expect your leaders to do something. Well, in this case, the best thing they can do is nothing. They don't need to. And for the next 6 months or so, they're probably not going to. My guess is they aren't going to touch it till after the election. Now, at least for the first half of the year, at least first 6 months, I'm figuring actually the first 3 quarters. Get me out to November. Let them see what happens for both political issues as well as economic. The economics are not going to change that dramatically. One of the other reasons why most economists don't figure we're going to have a recession this year is because it's a presidential election year. Incumbent presidents don't allow recessions. They spend money. They do whatever they have to do. The last one that had a recession during the election year was a guy named Jimmy Carter. You know how that had turned out. Okay? It don't happen. It don't happen. So one of the things that's going on is that, and we'll have to see how that plays out over time. But that's the reason why this year, fine. And incidentally, Texas is still, even if we have a recession and all of the models that we've seen, if we do have anything that approaches looking like a recession, either this year or next year, 2021 is the big question mark. it would probably be not severe, not nearly, nothing like the 08, 09, 07, 08, and 09. Nothing like that. More like the 2000, 2001, 2002 period, the dot-com bust, something like that, a little more modest. And Texas might still kind of blow right on through it. It depends. It depends. What is it depend? Why did we do so well this past decade? Why did Texas do so well? Because we didn't have, remember I talked about the hump over? When the hump over happened in 07, 08 at the national level, it went like this. When it happened at the same period of time, Texas went like this. It was much more modest, not nearly as deep, and we came back very quickly. We had something that only 2 or 3 or 4 other states had, but we had it in abundance. It was a thing called hydraulic fracture. Okay? And it was brand new in 2008, but it really didn't take off till 2010 and 2011. And so we had a boost. We had something to boost our economy back that the rest of the country didn't have, except for North and South Dakota and Montana, and who the hell wants to be there anyway? So we had that to keep our economy going. I mean, it affected you here. I mean, the Eagle Ford Shale, a lot of the headquarters, a lot of the activity found its way up here, especially in the services and so forth. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let me get to Texas. The national economy is going to do well this year. Next year, we're not as confident on. It could still be fine. What we're looking for and keeping our eyes open for is a trigger. What would be a trigger that would cause the decline? You with me? I mean, I'm telling you, it's common sense. There's nothing magical about any of this stuff. I mean, yeah, there's about 40, 50, 60 different measures that we all look at, and if we want to take any one or a handful of them, I can confuse the hell out of it. But the general notion is that things are doing pretty well, but we're looking for whatever that trigger. The biggest cloud, that capital market, the debt structure, corporate debt structure, sovereign debt structure. What's going to happen if and when one of the countries that are borrowing a lot of money defaults? Well, we had that. Greece defaulted. Incidentally, anybody interested in the 17% yield? Last time I looked, it was 17%. You can buy Greek bonds. And they're yielding between 17 and 20%. Good luck collecting. But that's the reason they're so high. But they're there, okay? So, and we're seeing it. I showed you the 10-year treasury, our 10-year treasury rate, that blue line a minute ago. We're running about 1.8, anywhere from 1.7 to 1.92%. The German 10-year rate is a negative 0.4. The Japanese is a negative 0.2. The French is a negative 0.2. The Italian, they don't even know. What my point is, America is still that leading country. We still have a really substantial and good growth rate for this. Let me talk about Texas. Here's what it looks like. 2019, it looks like Texas is going to finish the year at about 4.5%. That's a whole lot better than what we were forecasting when we started the year. That tells you about the forecasting. We had thought it was going to be slowed down to about 3. Hadn't slowed down. First quarter was 5.3, last quarter was 4, and the in-between quarter was about 4.4. The U.S. is going to finish it somewhere around 2.1, 2.2%. This is what it looks like. See, the red bars are consistently bigger. We've been doing just fine. And even back over here, back in 2008 and 9, when the U.S. economy had such a big drop, Texas didn't drop anywhere near like that, and we came back so much faster. We came back so much faster. And the feel is that if and when, and it's not really a matter of if, we will have a recession. Okay? If there's a reporter in the House, we will have a recession. What I can't tell you is exactly when. But I can also tell you that it probably will not be nearly as deep, and probably will not be nearly as severe as what we had in 7, 8, and 9. And Texas actually has the potential of weathering it fairly well. Now, the thing that may hinder us a little bit is that hydraulic fracturing may not be the saving grace anymore. It's matured now in the past year, so where it may not be our savior coming in. Let me show you, for example, here the last 10 years. We're starting a new decade. I'm not just talking about 2020. We're going to talk about what this decade versus the decade of the 20 teens. Okay? And employment growth. Texas was second only in terms of sheer numbers of jobs created to California. You got to remember that California is a substantially larger state, percentage-wise. Florida had a little bit more percentage growth, but sheer number of jobs. And for people in the real estate business, generally the numbers are more important than the rates. I need those. I mean, the old rule of thumb, a job can support at least one household, and really it's less than that because you're going to have 2 working people in most households, so it's less than that. But you can see how Texas, it just blew everybody out of the water for the last decade. And as Molly was saying, we don't have the 2019 numbers yet, or at least they're not final, so I didn't have them for you. But it's looking like that. This is my violation. I only anticipated 5 tables. But the 2 things I have circled, the one that I've got circled in the red is the mining and logging. That's the extraction industry. That's the energy, oil and gas. Year over year, from November to November, December numbers just came out yesterday. I didn't have time to do it. It's 100 jobs. It's basically flat. And we're expecting this year in 2020, that's going to turn into a negative number. The energy sector, the mining and logging sector, is probably going to continue some contraction. It's probably going to lose jobs. It won't be as a significant impact as you can see. It's in terms of sheer numbers, it's not so much. What I wanted to point out to you is the blue circle. Those are the service jobs. We have a service-based economy. More people work in services than in what's called goods producing, which is the mining, extraction, construction, and manufacturing. And our manufacturing is actually holding up quite well, which is remarkable because about 40% of our manufacturing here in Texas is tied to energy. We manufacture all the parts and the pieces and the pipes and all that kind of stuff. Of course, the midstream is still going strong with the pipes and so forth. Water, I know San Antonio doesn't worry about water, right? Well, I took a shower this morning. Water came on when I turned the valve on. But we're having those kind of issues. We'll see. One of the things that Texans do know how to do is build a pipeline. Think about it. We have pipelines everywhere. I mean, you can't dig anywhere in Texas without hitting a pipeline somewhere. Okay? And so we'll figure out how to move it around. Annual jobs, next 5 years are looking good. We're anticipating probably averaging somewhere close to about 2%. I got 1.8 for those of you who are close enough to the screen to be able to read that. We've been doing fine. We're projecting about 2.1% a year on job growth for the next 5 years. It's about 270,000 jobs a year or something like that. It's really, really, really good. And this year, incidentally, will be better than that. We're going to be about 2.7 by the end of this year. So 2019 in the 5 years is already giving us a big boost. And that won't be a nice straight line. It won't be nice and even like that. And if in one of those 5 years there is a recession, yeah, it'll probably go down, it'll dip down or go flat and then come back up again. But we'll have to see how that goes. The Dallas Federal Reserve, the leading index, is still holding up, and the whole point of this is that it's holding up there at a fairly high level. You can see after the oil bust of 2015, 2016, when we did have a slight decline in the state's economy. I mean, whether we like it or not, we're still got a lot of influence in our economy from the energy sector. And when the price of oil drops dramatically, then yes, our economy does get hit and it does feel it. here's this quick summary of that last 10-year period. And when we add in, if we add in the 2019 numbers, and we got some kind of preliminary numbers, so I can do it just kind of and not have to defend it and write it. We're going to add about 4 million people to the state's population. Okay? Daniel was mentioning the census that we're going to probably gain somewhere between 2 or 3 congressional seats and so on. So yes, the 2020 census, very important. Get out, get counted early and often. Because a lot of things depend on that head count. I mean, just a lot of things depend on that head count. So it really is important. But we've added about 4 million people, about 2.5 million jobs. And for the next 5 years, I got 2019 to 2023. My good news for you this morning is, it looks like, I mean, just based on what we're seeing today, it looks like that's going to, in general, as a general trend, is going to continue. About 1.8% a year on job growth, which is actually slower. It's actually down, just more of our, there's an economic term. It's a reversion to norm. The last decade was virtually a boom decade for the state of Texas. You generally can't sustain booms and boom time for very long. You eventually come back and grow at an average rate, right? That's just, and again, common sense will tell you that. You can't maintain that high level. It just won't happen. And to a large extent, you don't want it to. Did you notice in the film how many transportation things there were there? Roads, bridges, and so on. Biggest problem Texas are facing, the 2 biggest problems: infrastructure, particularly transportation, intra-city as well as intercity. In other words, getting around in town. Okay? I came up 1604 yesterday. It took me 2 hours to get from College Station to here. It took me 2.5 hours to get from 1604 to the hotel. Austin's even worse. That makes you feel better, doesn't it? But infrastructure, particularly transportation, but it's also water, sewer. You saw the water and treatment plants and so on there. And number 2, and this was dealt with a couple times, education. I mean, education, education, education. Education is not a cost. If you hear a politician talk about the expense of education, don't listen. Education is not a cost. It's not an expense. It's what? It's an investment. It's an investment in the future. I was listening to Daniel earlier. Yeah, I had a 7-year-old grandson down here in Houston. And I was thinking about it not long ago, talking to his dad, my son, when I don't hit him. What is he going to do when he's 27 or 37? What's he going to do for a living? How's he going to support himself and so on? And my guess is, odds are, the job he will have doesn't even exist today. How many jobs today do people have that didn't exist 25, 30 years ago? Okay? So what we have to do is educate our young people, and I'm going to get to it. If you're not aware of it, we got more younger people coming than even the millennials. We got to educate to think, to be able to handle this. So anyway, this is what the growth looks like for the next 5 years. Energy, most of you have seen this or know about it. The dark line here is the rig count. We're not going to be drilling as many rigs for very good reason. Up there when it was high, these are Texas rigs incidentally, when it was over 900 rigs, the average production was about 60, 70, 80, 90 barrels a day. The wells that are being drilled today are producing 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 barrels a day. Arithmetic, you don't need to be. The orange line up here, price of West Texas Intermediate, we're looking for that to be probably that 55, 65. That was a maroon line until it started going down like. No, that's not true. I still got 10 minutes. Incidentally, if you're not aware, in 2018, the United States became the #1 oil producer in the world. We beat out the Russians. Take that, commies. And we beat out Saudi Arabia. So we're number one. Texas produces 40% of all the oil out of the United States. When we become an independent republic again, we're the number 6 oil producer in the world. Does that give you a perspective of how that industry and how important energy and oil and gas extraction and so forth is to our state's economy? I hope it does give you an idea. Here's our projection for the metropolitan areas and employment gain. You can see San Antonio is just doing great. San Antonio has been an exceptional market for the last 10 years. Employment growth, population growth. It's been really a great ride. And it's been interesting because San Antonio historically was the slow, steady, it was the tortoise and hare, but it was the slow, steady growth. You had the economic base, you had military, you had tourism. Okay? It was nice, steady growth, low-cost housing, low-cost cost of living, great Tex-Mex food. I mean, just it was going on, and all of a sudden here in the last few years, it's really exploded. We're projecting about 2.5% growth for this year. It's going to look good. San Antonio economic outlook, job growth, annual job growth has been terrific. Have been absolutely outstanding. We look at the rate of increase in those curves going on up and out to 2018. Monthly job growth way ahead of trend and schedule. Unemployment rate, like the rest of the country, the rest of the state, just historically low, down here just a little over 3%. No particular problem. Per capita income, level off a little bit, but it's still going up. That's at jobs and income and people I've been talking about, right? It's got to be there. Here's what you may not have seen is people. Bexar County population. The Texas State Demographer's Office, which is here at UTSA, incidentally, if you're not aware, revised their projections last November 18th. Okay, so it's a little over a year now. And San Antonio was the only of the major MSAs where the revised projection was actually higher than the previous estimate. They revised it up based on the 2010 to 2015 trends that have been established at least for that 5 years, as compared to the growth rate from 2000 to 2010, the census data from the 2 years. So you can see it looks like it's going to go up and start hitting somewhere north of 3 million people, approaching 3.25 million people by 2050. Comal County is projected to expand rapidly. You can see it going right up I-35, right? Henry Cisneros, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, however long it was ago, kept talking about the San Antonio-Austin corridor. He was just ahead of his time, as typically Henry was, or is. And that corridor is really filling in. So you can see how Comal County, Hays County, I put Hays County in here because it's just the next step county up. I know it's not technically part of the San Antonio MSA, but nevertheless, it's all tying together. The whole San Antonio I-35 corridor is tying together. Kendall County, we saw the film there a minute ago with what was going on in Kendall County. And look at the revised projection for Kendall County. I mean, it's talk about an area that's catching fire and going on. Now, I grant you small numbers right now, okay? And if you want to know how to lie with statistics, which economists are really, really good at, you take small numbers and let them increase. Guadalupe County was the only one that went down just a little bit in terms of the revision, but still very, very much a positive thing. Let me talk about, remember I saw jobs and income and demographic people? So let's talk about people. And I just did, because I just gave you the population growth. Here's how we stack up. Texas, as you can see, the last decade, this is what did it. Here's what really took off, was people. All right? I mean, it wasn't even close. I got a chance to show this slide in Washington, D.C. A month ago, where I was on the podium with people from California and Florida, from the Realtors Association. California has net domestic out-migration. More people are leaving the state than coming to the state. New Jersey has net out-migration. We don't have that problem. I mean, we gained something like 380,000 people last year. About half of that gain was personal deaths and natural increase. And that's interesting because it's happening for the whole U.S. If you were not aware of it, 2019, the estimate is the population growth of the whole U.S. population was only 0.5%, 0.5%. We grew considerably bigger than that. We grew at about 1.8. But we added people. The birth rate keeps declining. People are not having as many kids. So, but the really good news that I'm happy to report is that the good guys are living longer. I'm very happy to make that report to you. Anyway, here's what's going on. I know Ken's fixing to run me off. Here's what's happened around the state the last 10 years by county. It's not been universal. We've had almost 100 counties lose population. I mean, you can tell from looking at the red counties, evidently people don't want to live next to Louisiana. Although last night they changed that, right? And then you got out here in west central Texas where there's really no reason to be anywhere. We do. Well, some of them are getting ready for the next cash crop. Some of them are even jumping the gun on the next cash crop. But that's coming. And the urban triangle, of course, with urbanization, Texas population is going to increase somewhere between 22 and 30 million people. Here's the one I wanted to show you. Look at the far right is that bar, 85 and above. This is the single year age distribution. We're the good guys and the baby boomers, and you can see the population groups. But look at the group out here on the far left, Gen Z. I call it Gen I. This is the first generation ever born, will never know the world, have no concept of the world without the internet. And the internet has changed everything. The millennials are, they're the techie generation right now at the age group, but do you think they're techie? Gen Z is even more techie. My 7-year-old doesn't exist without his iPad and his phone and the whole, I mean, I have to ask him how to do things. So we're saying, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. 8 million of them. That's the biggest single age group. Incidentally, that's different at the U.S. level. That number is actually declining slightly for Gen Z. Not in Texas. We're a young population. Texas is the third youngest state in the Union. 34.4 median age. We're young. We're fertile. We're active. Well, some of us are. And so we're adding to that, but also the people that are moving here. And of course, we all know we're building the wall on the wrong damn river. We cut off our labor supply, right? We needed to put the wall on the Red River, keep the Yankees out. I started to say the Pecos should keep the Californians out, but for here, we'll have to see about that. Okay, I just wanted to show you, here's what the projection is for 2050. You can see it's going to continue that I-35 corridor. 9 out of 10 Texans live along I-35 routes. So that's where the action is. I'm going to leave it with you here and let you enjoy Maine. That's the reason I told you I was really happy they put me up here first. If you think I was energetic, you wait.
Well, I hope you found that briefing very informative. I know I did. If you're looking for more information on your specific community, go to my website, jasonpayne.cbharper.com. Look for the pull-down tab for monthly market update. You can find your specific community. Thank you and have a great day. Take care now. Bye.